Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome. Today the Israeli occupation forces killed 2 Palestinians from northern Gaza. Israeli sources report that the 2 Palestinians were among a group of 6 people attempting to infiltrate into Israel. Meanwhile, the occupation forces, backed by dozens of tanks, raided the Khan Yunis refugee camp in southern Gaza, destroying 8 homes. Armed Palestinians resisted the occupation forces, leading to violent clashes between the 2 sides. 2 Israeli soldiers were wounded by an explosive container. 14 workers were killed and 2 others were wounded when a plastic laboratory caught on fire in northern Beirut, Lebanon. Firemen spent 8 hours putting out the fire, while civil defense units pulled out the bodies. The victims were from Egypt, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. The Lebanese authorities are investigating the incident to determine the causes of the fire. The Loya Jirga Council resumed talks concerning the new constitution in Afghanistan. During their second round of talks, the council reviewed the articles about the Islamic characteristic of Afghanistan. They are also discussing the role of women in Afghani society and the authorities the council will have under the constitution. It is to be noted that the Loya Jirga Council is composed of Afghanistan's elite, tribal leaders, religious figures, and lawmakers. Now to Pakistan. President Pervez Musharraf survived an explosion attack against his convoy. It was passing through a street in Rawalpindi city near Islamabad. Pakistani officials say that the explosion occurred minutes after the procession passed through the area, adding that a bridge was destroyed, but no human losses were reported.
For the past 3 decades, Saddam preoccupied the minds of the Iraqi people. He compared himself with the great heroes of the Islamic civilization, promising Arabs with an anticipated victory. However, his wars, which he compared to the holy wars of Sayyid ibn Abi Waqqas, or with the wars against the Crusaders, only led to defeats, transferring Iraq from a rich country to an occupied land. During his reign, Saddam lived in extreme wealth, but after he was ousted, he wore simple clothes and could not find a better shelter than a small hole with little ventilation. Now he is under the mercy of the American soldiers.
The ousted President Saddam Hussein was last seen on the 9th of April, before the American forces entered Baghdad, and now, on the 13th of December, when he was arrested by these forces. Between the previous 2 dates, many events took place, including the fall of this man, who controlled the destiny of the Iraqi people for more than 30 years. His demise started with the collapse of his statue in the Firdous Square, ending his iron fist policy, which he used to rule Iraq. Saddam started as a poor orphan in the Auja village, near Tikrit, and transformed himself to a dictator of his country. Before turning 30 years of age, he entered the political life in Iraq from the back door by participating in the assassination attempt of the first Iraqi president, Abdel Karim Qasim. In the wake of the failed assassination attempt, he was exiled to Cairo. When he came back, he was imprisoned by Abdel Karim Arif. In 1979, he appointed himself as the Secretary General of the ruling Ba'ath Party. This enabled him to establish his control in Iraq by building intelligence agencies and carrying out assassination campaigns against opponents, and in some cases against friends and relatives. Furthermore, all military or political leaders were also eliminated if they were more competent than Saddam, who was called Mr. President and Leader. Saddam Hussein was obsessed with living in secrecy. He was one of the founders who established Hanin, the first security agency that was established after the coup against Abdelkarim Qasim in 1963. The objective was to strengthen the new regime and get rid of the opposition. The Hanin agency became the nucleus of other agencies, such as the General Intelligence and Special Security Agencies. These security agencies were the most oppressive in the world, making it impossible to get rid of Saddam Hussein. Saddam hired a large number of informants and prison guards and consulted with them when making dangerous political decisions, including ethnic cleansing campaigns and assassination and torture operations. He was not held accountable and gained the loyalty of those that joined him by establishing a pseudo-democracy. People knew little about the personality of Saddam Hussein and his private life. He was overprotective of his destitute childhood, just like he was overprotective of his military secrets and his hideouts, especially after he was transformed from a Western ally to a fearful and despicable enemy. He built palaces in secret places and dug tunnels throughout the country. He hired doubles to attend some of the events in his place, and food tasters to test the food for poison. There were some additional methods he used in order to fulfill his obsession to live in secrecy. His secret living started in the underground life in Daouja village and ended in the international black market. During these years of his secret life, Saddam launched his wars, first against Iran and a second one against Kuwait, causing deep divisions in the Arab relations and bringing economic catastrophes on his country and exhausting the Iraqi people. Finally, during his war with the US, he was caught in a hole. Now his fate is under the mercy of Washington and the new Iraqi rulers.
From Cairo, we have Dr. Abdel Suleiman, a military and political analyst. Dr. Suleiman, how can a man with his strength, determination, and military training have such a humiliating end? If Saddam really wanted to surrender to the Americans, why didn't he do that before the war? He was offered several propositions, but he refused them. Was he betting on something that never happened?
We are not being objective by describing Saddam Hussein as a man with determination and military expertise. He's far from that. He lacks military understanding and skills. He's a politician and a leader from the Ba'ath Party. He was known to use excessive violence, enabling him to control powerful positions and impose a regime of punishment and terror. He did not have military understanding and expertise. Otherwise, he would have never accepted the American military challenge. In the beginning, he did not expect the U.S. to attack and occupy Iraq. He thought that the U.S. will only bomb Iraq like what happened in 1998 and before. This leads us to believe that he was surprised by the invasion. He did not take preparational measures and did not have the capabilities to do so. All what he did is to strengthen internal security. This explains why, when things got serious, when the American and British forces arrived to Baghdad's outskirts, he preferred to escape with a few loyal people. He did not escape with his family members like his sons, expecting them to manage by themselves. I personally predicted that Saddam would end in this manner because, without a doubt, he is not a resistance fighter.
American President George W. Bush said on Monday that the weekend capture of ousted Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein has ended more than 30 years of tyranny in Iraq that will never come back. Speaking at a White House press conference, Bush rejected any suggestion that the United States might negotiate with the ousted dictator, insisting that he face justice. Bush asserted that any trial of the former dictator will involve Iraqis and withstand international scrutiny.
We will work with the Iraqis to develop a a way to try him that will stand international scrutiny, I guess is the best way to put it. I shared my sentiments today with Prime Minister Martin of Canada. He asked me about Saddam Hussein and his trial. I said, look, the Iraqis need to be very much involved. He was the person that, they were the people that were brutalized by this man. He murdered them, he gassed them, he tortured them, he had rape rooms. And they need to be very much involved in the process. And we'll work with the Iraqis to develop a process. And of course we want it to be fair. And of course we want the world to say, well, this, you got a fair trial, because whatever justice has meted out needs to stand international scrutiny. I've got my own personal views of how he ought to be treated, but I'm not an Iraqi citizen. It's going to be up to the Iraqis to make those decisions.
Some 100 supporters of deposed Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein attacked 2 police stations in northern Baghdad with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades Monday afternoon. A police lieutenant said the Saddam loyalists struck at the police stations in the Ahmadiyya district a day after American forces announced the capture of the deposed Iraqi dictator. He reported that about 100 assailants had attacked 2 neighborhood police stations with automatic weapons and RPGs from rooftops and the street without reporting any casualties. Eyewitnesses said clashes broke out during a pro-Saddam demonstration, adding that police opened fire to disperse the crowd who were firing in the air. Tension has been running high in the Sunni district since the announcement of Saddam's capture. Some 200 people held a pro-Saddam demonstration in Ahmadiyya late Sunday. Members of the Iraqi Interim Governing Council, led by Abdelaziz al-Hakim, met French leaders Monday, insisting that France will have a role to play in the country's reconstruction. After meeting Foreign Minister Dominique de Villepin, al-Hakim said it was essential for the Governing Council to have a strong relationship with France. He added that France had been one of the first countries to insist on the transfer of authority as quickly as possible to the Iraqis. The Governing Council's outgoing rotating leader, Jalal Talabani, said the interim Iraqi authorities were asking for a French presence, notably on a political level. Talabani also thanked de Villepin for his earlier announcement that France was prepared to forego part of its debt owed by Iraq. At virtually the same time in Moscow, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Yuri Fedotov told the Interfax news agency that his country was also willing to consider restructuring Iraq's debt.
Simultaneous car bombs ripped through Iraqi police stations on Monday, killing at least 9 people and wounding 17. The attacks made clear that the capture of Saddam Hussein late Saturday will not make things easier for the U.S. occupation of Iraq. The Bush administration had earlier said it does not expect an improvement on the ground.
As expected, attacks in Iraq continued despite Saddam Hussein's arrest. On Monday, 2 car bomb attacks rocked Baghdad. At least 9 people were killed and many others were injured when a car packed with explosives went off at Az-Zuhur police station at Al-Husseiniya village, 30 kilometers north of Baghdad. Several people were seen being carried out from the scene minutes after the blast. Lieutenant Colonel Ali Amr said 10 officers were injured. Amr said the explosion in Al-Husseiniya occurred when a Toyota Land Cruiser drove through the razor fence encircling the building and detonated next to the gate. The blast left a 1-meter deep crater about 10 meters from the entrance to the building, whose facade was demolished, and a thick smoke was seen rising from the scene. Earlier, a car bomb exploded outside Amiriya Criminal Investigation Department in Baghdad, injuring at least 7 people, including 4 officers. Police said a bomber detonated the car and was killed in the blast.
First car attacked the gate. It exploded, and then shortly thereafter, a second car entered the compound. It was engaged by Iraqi police and U.S. military forces. The driver of that vehicle exited the vehicle and went inside the compound. Where he's still held up.
We were heading to our post and there was a car bomb. Another one is in the area and we are trying to defuse it. Such acts are done by bad people who want to create chaos for police and citizens alike.
Another car bomb was discovered nearby in Al-Amiriya and sappers defused it. The bomb was the latest in a string of attacks on Iraqi police and other targets seen as cooperating with the US-led occupation. Scores of Iraqis have been killed. On Sunday, a car bomb exploded at Al-Khalidiyya town, 60 kilometers west of Baghdad, killing at least 18 people and wounding scores. The bombings occurred though security was tightened in Iraq since the last 24 hours. The police presence on the streets of Baghdad was increased on Sunday night amid fear that the fighters would retaliate against the arrest of Saddam Hussein by launching an attack in the Iraqi capital. In Tikrit, Saddam's stronghold, U.S. troops were again patrolling the streets with extra caution. Some 600 soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division raided the farmhouse outside Tikrit, where Saddam was finally discovered.
U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said that captured former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein has so far refused to give the U.S. military any intelligence information. Meanwhile, the current president of the Iraqi Interim Governing Council, Sayyid Abdulaziz al-Hakim, said the 66-year-old former president will be tried by Iraqi judges in a special court set up to deal with war crimes cases. This report has more.
U.S. President George W. Bush may have won a new boost to his 2004 presidential elections campaign after the capture of Washington's ace of spades, Saddam Hussein, on Saturday, but it will not end the ongoing chaos in the country.
The capture of Saddam Hussein does not mean the end of violence in Iraq. We still face terrorists who would rather go on killing the innocent than accept the rise of liberty in the heart of the Middle East. Such men are a direct threat to the American people, and they will be defeated.
Bush went on TV Sunday to announce that Saddam, whom he once called the man who tried to kill my dad, will face justice, which he denied to millions. But White House officials declined to specify what he meant by justice. Defense Minister Donald Rumsfeld announced that the United States will grant the man they once supported the protection stemming from the Geneva Conventions, but he stopped short of saying the ousted Iraqi leader, who has been eluding U.S. troops for 8 months, will be granted former prisoner of war status. The comments raised questions about whether U.S. intelligence agencies will be able to mine Saddam Hussein for information, because under the Geneva Conventions, he is obligated to give his captors only his name, date of birth, rank, and regimental serial number. Current president of the Iraqi Interim Governing Council, Sayyid Abdulaziz al-Hakim, said the 66-year-old former president will be tried by Iraqi judges in a special court set up to deal with war crimes cases. Hakim said the Iraqi court would be under the supervision of international experts and used the example of international tribunals already in place to hear war crime cases such as the one in The Hague. Saddam would be the first to be tried before such a court in Iraq if the case against him is completed with all necessary evidence. 600 U.S. soldiers acted on information gathered from 5 to 10 members of Saddam's close families over 10 days. They conducted a raid dubbed Operation Red Dawn Saturday night in a farm near the village of Adwar, near Saddam's hometown Tikrit. They found Saddam in a 6 to 8 deep hole covered by dirt and bricks and a carpet beside a 2-room shack. When soldiers pulled the bearded man out, the man offered no resistance. According to the operation commander, Major Brian Reed, the first words of Saddam Hussein were, "I am Saddam Hussein, I am the president of Iraq, and I want to negotiate." Video footage of the ousted president were released after his capture. In the early hours of Monday, Iraqis rushed to buy newspapers to read details of the capture and to see Saddam's image before his capture. Jubilant Iraqis were celebrating earlier in the streets. They cheered and fired their guns in the air. But in the captured president's hometown Tikrit, people have spoken their sadness and demanded the immediate release of their leader. A group of around 30 youth took to the streets of Auja, south of Tikrit, on Monday to shout their support to Saddam, saying that treason led to his capture.
Arabs shared little of the world's joy over Saddam Hussein's capture, with many bitter over another pretended victory for an arrogant pro-Israeli United States. Though some Arab leaders and officials, especially in the Gulf states, hailed the arrest, those in other Arab states were subdued, expressing hope only that US troops may soon end their occupation of Iraq.
The news of Saddam Hussein's capture drew mixed reactions around the Arab world. Kuwait hailed the arrest of the one who ordered the invasion on their emirate in 1990. In Riyadh, Gulf Cooperation Council Chief Abdurrahman Al-Atiyah described the event as an achievement and a step on the road towards restoring stability and national unity in Iraq. He added he hoped that it will be followed by other achievements on the road towards transferring power to the Iraqi people, a rapid restoration of constitutional life, and the formation of an elected and representative government. A statement from the government in Jordan said a page has been turned with his capture and hoped Iraqis could soon take charge of their own country again. But some newspaper commentators saw it as a humiliating episode for Arabs. Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Maher said he hoped the event will quicken the transfer of power back to Iraqis and the withdrawal of US forces. Arab League Secretary General Amr Moussa said the Iraqi people should decide the fate of the old regime and its old leaders. Palestinian officials refused to comment after having paid a heavy political price for supporting Saddam during the 1991 US-led Gulf War. While senior Hamas leader Abdelaziz Al-Rantisi said the US's capture of Saddam Hussein amounted to nothing more than a moral victory for US President George W. Bush.
Honestly, what the United States did is ugly and despicable. It is an insult to all Arabs and insult to Muslims. This behavior by the Americans is extremely rude and impolite.
Also, many in the Palestinian territories, Cairo and Beirut, openly cursed a false victory for a US they see as an arrogant and unjust power. They feared it would ensure the re-election of George W. Bush next year. For many ordinary Palestinians, the TV footage of a disheveled Saddam obediently submitting to a medical examination by his US captors was a kind of humiliation. Some said he should have put up a fight and that his surrender is a stain on Arab honor.
In the Egyptian capital, Cairo's second international conference was wrapped up Sunday, though the news on the arrest of the former Iraqi president had a great impact on the rally aiming at supporting the resistance in Palestine and Iraq. The conferees were sure Saddam's arrest will not hold the resistance operations against US occupation troops in Iraq.
Moments before the press conference was about to be held concluding Cairo's second international conference on supporting the resistance in Palestine and Iraq, the news of Saddam Hussein's arrest was announced. The news took many aback, but it had little impact on the final recommendations. The main concern was the continuation of Iraqi resistance against US occupation in Iraq, and most conferees thought it was safe.
When we stood against the war, we didn't stand in support of Saddam or any Arab regime. Should Saddam be captured or killed, thousands of Iraqis were captured and killed, as were thousands of Afghans. No doubt the Americans and their allies want to make use of the symbolic aspect of Saddam's capture. We must not fall in the trap and focus on Saddam in person.
Saddam Hussein has a weak influence, if any. This was a card used by the US administration to mar the resistance, claiming it is led by Saddam's men. His presence or absence will not affect the resistance because there are occupation troops and occupied land and a people resisting this occupation.
The participants further wanted to ensure Saddam be tried. Some 150 representatives from around 30 countries also sought means of further supporting Palestinian and Iraqi resistance. They also expressed concern over the spread of the U.S. colonialism plot to countries other than Iraq, noticeably as U.S. President George W. Bush has signed the Syrian Accountability Act.
The pretext is gone because they used to link Saddam to the resistance, saying he used to lead them. But they will create a new pretext now.
The most important thing to observe is that the lawless and brutal occupation of Iraq continues. People are dying every day, and we have to do all within our power to see that that occupation ends.
I think there's a lesson here. I think here in this room and those we represent around the world like to consider ourselves the new superpower.
24 hours on, the news of the capture of Saddam Hussein is still hitting the headlines around the world. Iranian government spokesman Abdullah Ramazanzadeh is calling for an impartial international tribunal to try the one-time Iraqi strongman. Head of the Arbitrative Expediency Council, Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, says Saddam's end stems from disrespect to his own citizens. Judiciary Chief Ayatollah Mahmoud Hashemi Shahgudi said the capture of the ousted Iraqi dictator by those who brought him to power sets the perfect example for those relying on oppressors. Head of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan in Iraq, Jalal Talabani, said the arrest of Saddam is another reason to speed up efforts to give Iraq's administration to Iraqis. Australian Prime Minister John Howard said his troops will remain in Iraq despite recent developments. French Foreign Minister Dominique de Villepin says the capture sets the stage for boosting UN's role in the future of Iraq. U.S. soldiers, U.S. officials describe Saddam's arrest as a big victory for Bush administration, but anti-war activists and scholars in the United States say Washington itself had played a key role in the growth of Saddam Hussein. This while two near-simultaneous suicide car bombs in Iraq left 9 Iraqis dead and about 30 others wounded, killing off hopes the capture of Saddam Hussein would stop a raging insurgency. Separate police stations to the west and north of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, came under attack a day after American forces found the ousted president down a hole near his hometown city of Tikrit. Iranian President Mohammad Khatami, in a meeting with Iran's new charge d'affaires to Iraq, Hassan Kazemi on Monday, voiced Iran's readiness to help reconstruct Iraq. President Mohammad Khatami then stressed further cooperation between Tehran and Baghdad and put emphasis on Iran's serious cooperation with Iraq's governing council, as well as putting into effect of the agreements made by the two sides in various fields, oil and fuel in particular. Iran and Iraq's railway networks will be joined up in the near future, Iranian Minister of Roads and Transport Ahmad Khorram said on Monday. The project to link Iran's southern port city of Khorramshahr to the Iraqi port city of Basra on rail has been passed, and that the two countries have reached an agreement in that regard. He further described Iran-Iraq railway network as significant, saying this is a key mode of transportation of both pilgrims and goods. Domestic engineers and technicians at Iran's Sadra Marine Industries in the southern port city of Bushehr managed to design and manufacture the giant platforms to be installed at phases 4 and 5 of the offshore South Pars gas field. Once operational, the structures, each weighing 2,200 tons and measuring 34 meters in length, will help the national natural gas output soar by 54 million cubic meters per day.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.